Well, welcome back, folks. We have a real treat for you here. Kardo is our next speaker, and he's a London-based experienced product designer with a unique perspective that's shaped by becoming visually impaired himself. He's had a 15-year career that combines personal experience and professional expertise to advocate for inclusive design practices that benefit everyone. And he draws on firsthand knowledge of accessibility challenges, which makes him just even more dedicated to creating products and experiences that empower users regardless of ability. And his talk today, it's called Well, I Didn't See That Coming. And it's going to be really, really great because he's going to be sharing his personal story of becoming a visually impaired designer. He'll be talking about what it's like to navigate the design world with a vision impairment, how it's transformed the way he thinks about design and accessibility, and why inclusive design isn't just important, it's essential. So with that, please welcome Kardo to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming along, and thank you, Smashing Conferences, for having me tonight. That's great. So basically, I'm a product designer based in London. I have been in the business for nearly 15 years. And luckily tonight, I'm not presenting anything technical or theory or guidelines because Sarah and Stephanie did a brilliant job. I could never do that to that level, so thank you. But I would like to share a personal story with you all. This is something that happened to me about 10 years ago, so I was quite young, much younger and much more good looking than now. But 10 years ago, something happened to me that it literally flipped everything upside down for me, both personally and in my professional life. So before I get into this slide, I normally like to show off a little bit. So bear with me and feel free to laugh, feel free to, because this is, I mean this to be a lighthearted presentation rather than something quite serious. So this is me about 10 years ago. Oh, look at me, fit and handsome. I used to do these things all the time in terms of Tough Mudder, half marathons, whatever I could get my hands on, I would do it. Like, for example, every weekend or every couple of weeks, I would be like a goat up some mountain in Scotland or Wales or anywhere else around the world. I would go and do this every winter a couple of times, breaking bones normally, because I was never good at it, but that didn't stop me from trying. And again, cycling, I used to go out on the weekend for 100, 150 kilometer cycle ride with my friends in Surrey in London. So this was me for years and years and years. And again, this is a proof of my eyesight. There is a funny story. There is a funny story about this, about a fun fair where I went, and this is 2 shots through the same hole, and I got banned from the fun fair because the guy was losing everything he had and he stopped me playing. So that is a proof of how my eyesight was till about 10 years ago. So about 10 years ago, something happened. It all started while I was at the barber's. And all of us, I used to live in a dodgy area in London, and all of a sudden I could see some flashing lights like a police car, ambulance. And I asked the hairdresser, I said, what is that police car doing outside? And he said, there are no police cars. And then I realized it was happening in my eyes. So I went home thinking I was just tired. And I went to bed. The next day I woke up, I was completely fine. Then a couple of days later, it came back, and then slowly it became more frequent. It was becoming 2-3 times a day, and it was getting me very disorientated, very dizzy, and it was very, very annoying. So I went to the doctors, and they misdiagnosed me with migraine for 2 years. And when I went back and said this is getting worse and worse, and basically they did a lot of eye tests and all these things, and they said it's just migraine. There is nothing wrong with it. Until it was getting so bad, I asked for an MRI scan. I said I need to have an MRI scan. So I went in. I still remember it was on a Sunday. I went in. I came out of the MRI machine, and the technician was looking down on me, and he had a really he looked like he had seen a ghost, basically. And he said to me, "Are you on your own?" I said, "Yes." "Are you driving?" I said, "Yes." "Are you okay to go home?" By the time he asked these questions, I knew there was something seriously wrong. So I went to work on Monday, and I got a call straight away saying, "Tomorrow come to the hospital and bring somebody with you," which is always a reassuring thing to hear. So I went to the doctors and waiting there at the hospital. All of a sudden, he comes in with with his assistant rolling a massive computer that looked like something from the 60s into the room, and he turns it on and he shows me this. And I said to him, "What is that?" He said, "It's your head." And I said, "I know it's my head, but what is it?" And he said he had been a surgeon for so many years and he hadn't seen something like this. I mean, this was the size of literally a lemon in my head. And he said it could be, um, he said, "I can think of something. I'm thinking about something, but I'm not sure. I need to check with other people to see. But it's too deep and we cannot operate," which is not really a great thing to hear from a doctor. When you have something like that in your head. And literally at this moment, I had already stopped listening to him because my mind went completely somewhere else. I was thinking about my family. The entire world basically changed within a second. So I went back a couple of days later and he said, "Yeah, we can operate on you, but it's," he said, "first of all, tell me what your job is." And I said, "I'm a designer." And apologies for the cursing, but the first thing that came out of his mouth was "shit." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because it's in your visual cortex." So if you imagine this is the image taken from from below, the lesion or the tumor itself is in my right hand side in my visual cortex, just around here. And he said, "We can operate, but you might lose some of your peripheral vision." And I thought, how can it be? I mean, peripheral vision, fine. And I said, "Okay," but I had seen people doing brain surgery while they were awake. And I said, "I would like to be awake and try and guide you so you don't damage my optic tracts." Initially, they were very hesitant to do it, but then because they said it's about 3-hour operation and you might get tired and all these things, but I said no, I would like to be awake, so maybe we can avoid damaging a lot of places. So they reluctantly agreed, and they before that they gave me a nice contract to sign in case I suffered a mild case of death. And he said to me, "Go and sort out your affairs." So I went and I wrote a will. I didn't have much really. I had my bike and I had my mortgage. So I left my son the bike and I left my wife the mortgage, and that was it. So I went into the operating room. You can see here, that's me. During the operation, awake, and they are working on me. 3 surgeons worked on me, and the operation took instead of 3 hours, it took 9 hours. And 9 hours of laughter, joke, and having fun. These guys are proper professionals, and they made it feel as easy as being at a pub with your friends. We were literally constantly cracking jokes. And halfway through, I said to the nurse, I said, can somebody call my partner, because it was meant to be 3 hours, and this is basically nearly 5.5, 6 hours. And she said, what do you want me to tell her? I said, tell her I'm in stitches. And basically it was like that. It was just fun the entire time. There was a behavioral, cognitive, behavioral coach in terms of cognition and stuff, was trying to do maths tests with me, showing me shapes and stuff. I started ranting about the accessibility of her cards actually during my operation, because they were laminated and you couldn't see them under the bright light. I said to her, I said, when I get out, I'll redesign them for you, but she never got in touch. So her loss. So in terms of, and this is me, for a long time I was joking with people, pretending I don't remember who I am, or I don't pretend I don't remember who they were. I was confusing people just for a laugh. I mean, that's how I take life. I just don't take anything seriously. But after my
what's your name?
I became a rapper as well. So after that, my vision was very blurry. I couldn't see anything properly. But during the operation, I realized something had gone wrong, because my vision all of a sudden changed. And after a couple of days, when the vision was clear, in a week actually, maybe, I started realizing how bad the situation was. So let me give you a little bit of anatomy of the eye. I always thought that right eye sends signals to the left-hand side of your brain, and the left eye sends signals to the right-hand side of the brain. But that is not the case, because your eyes are split into two. And in both eyes, the left side sends signal to the right, and the right side sends signal to the left. And because of my tumor was, if you look at that diagram, at the bottom part of that blue area, so the eyes are still 20/20, perfect vision. But when the signal goes to that part of my brain, because of the operation, it got damaged, the brain says, what am I supposed to do with this? What do you want me to do with that? So if you look at my eye tests on the right-hand side, those two, these are eye tests, and whatever is black, I cannot see. So what that means is, for example, a healthy sighted person will see this if they look directly at something. If you directly at something, you look at that, where there's a piece of dust or whatever, it could be something very small, or a mountain, you see something like this. But for me, I see this. So I have a 50% field of vision, and it's literally a straight cut. It's not black, it's not white. Think about it as a PNG. And this was really, really irritating to live with in the beginning, and to realize that you had lost so much. When he said peripheral vision, I thought it was just a tiny bit. I didn't realize it was going to be this bad. So I said, is this fixable? They said, no, this is a live condition now. You cannot do anything about it. And I said, so what am I supposed to do? And they said, yeah, you need to retrain yourself, do some rehab. And they gave me something like this. It was on a screen that I had to stare at a dot in the middle and then click where the red dot was going, just to basically improve your scanning. And it was really, really rubbish. This is what I've realized in healthcare. I mean, we have one of the best free healthcare system in the world, but unfortunately, the tech that they use, or the help that there is in terms of technology and stuff, is really backwards, and it's not up to standard at all. So I couldn't benefit from anything like this. So I started playing games like whack-a-mole and swing ball and stuff, just to improve my scanning speed. and being able to see the world, kind of creating a complete picture of the world around me. And I did this both on like digital games, but I also used to go to the fun fair or the arcade and just play these games constantly. I did this for like 6 months constantly, until I got to a stage like, if I'm in a room, people don't even notice that I'm doing it. And I have learned to live with it normally. So the only thing I can't do these days is driving and cycling, and that's just for safety. So it took me a long time to kind of rehabilitate myself to be able to go about life in a normal way. But even till this day, we are talking about accessibility here, and things have changed for me in terms of how I interact with computers. Initially, when I came out of the operation and my eyesight was blurry and I was having difficulty reading stuff, I relied a lot on screen readers, voice to text technology. So I had to rely on a lot of these things until I slowly retrained myself. But if you look at something simple as responsive design, this is an article from Wikipedia talking about my condition, which is called hymnopia. If you see the desktop and the mobile, as I said, it doesn't matter how big or small something is. When I stare at it directly, I only see half of it. So when I read, it's like this. The difference between those two is the distance that my eyes have to go back and track where I was on a monitor, on a screen, like computer screen, versus a phone screen. The distance is much shorter, so I don't lose myself in the copy, and I'm able to track the lines. So things like text size, line spacing, letter spacing, all these things are very important, and responsiveness, it's key. And you'd be surprised how many websites that I go on are still crap in terms of responsiveness, something simple as that. So this is number one. For somebody like me with my condition, that's a must in terms of that needs to be there. And I write and read in right to left languages as well. You might think that is easier, but it's actually more difficult, because when we read, our peripheral vision is way ahead of us. So by the time we are on one word, our peripheral vision, without actually realizing, has already started reading the next word. But in Arabic and other right to left languages, because I don't see what the next word is, it's actually harder to read a sentence. Again, I'm used to it now. It's been nearly 10 years, so I'm living with it normally. But it is very, very disturbing when you have something like this. And to put a cherry on the cake, I became epileptic because of it. Again, there are design implications in terms of what is wise to do and what's not very wise to do in terms of accessibility with people with epilepsy. But one of the funniest episodes, and they were all in different shapes of sizes. Epilepsy is not just about collapsing on the floor and shaking. It comes in all sorts of things, and I've pretty much seen all of it. But the funniest thing was this. I was at home, not me, but the family were watching X Factor. I absolutely hate that show. And Simon Cowell was making fun of, I could hear it, when was making fun of the guy on stage. And I lifted my head, and the guy was dressed as a chipmunk. And I said to my wife, I said, "Why is he dressed as a chipmunk?" And she said, "What chipmunk?" Then I looked at Simon Cowell. He looked like a chipmunk, and I turned around, and my family looked like this. I was hallucinating. And I went through a they say I don't do drugs, but they say it's basically like taking acid or speed. So I saw the entire family watching TV, looking like this, and slowly, I went back to the hospital for a week. Slowly, I every day things were changing. So one day things were like a cubist painting. The other day everything was all over the place, like people would look like Lego men, for example. And things in terms of scale was just changing. Things were becoming big. People with massive heads, tiny bodies. It was basically very disturbing. And this went on for like a few weeks. When I came out of the hospital, my partner ordered a taxi, and I was literally felt like that big guy with a tiny car in front of him. And I started laughing. I was thinking, how am I going to fit in this tiny little matchbox? But yeah, so all that now, it's under control. Everything is fine. Everything is good. But I still feel like I still experience the accessibility issues in terms of like web stuff. Forget about the physical life stuff, which is a different struggle or story. But in terms of web stuff, I still feel it, but I have learned to live with it. And I have learned to make fun of it, because you have to make the lighthearted thing, otherwise it will drive you crazy. So some of the funny moments I'm going to share with you now, it's when I bump into this thing every time, and I apologize to it because I think it's a human. And the amount of times I've bumped into people, and some of them want to pick a fight, so I have to explain to them that this is a situation. But a lot of times I bump into a lamppost and apologize to it, and I do that till this day. Or I eat half of my food on a plate because I don't see the left-hand side, and that's why I'm so gorgeous. But yeah, this is something that happens. My wife took me for a dinner, and there was a piece of steak, and I said that was gorgeous. Shame it was so small. And she looked at my plate, and I realized I'd literally eaten 50% of it, and 50% of it was on the plate still. So, and her and my son, they love stealing my drinks. They sit on my left-hand side, and they just basically take my drinks all the time. So that is the story, but it has changed my life a lot. It has changed my life. I think about life completely different, both professionally and personally. I'm going to be a bit cheesy here because, and it's true. After this, the minute I got the news that I had cancer, nothing mattered more than my wife and my child, my son. Everything else just became background. It became irrelevant, even close family and stuff, because my brain just went to those two. I learned to not take things too seriously. I learned to not take things for granted. I also learned the most difficult thing for me was I had to learn to rely on people and ask for help, because that's not something that I used to do. I was always the guy who did all the shopping, did all the traveling, all the driving, and I was always out and about. But all of a sudden, I couldn't do anything that I showed you up front in the slides when I said I'm trying to show off. But none of that stuff is possible anymore because of safety, because of I don't have a driver's license anymore. But you learn to live with it, you learn to adapt, you become, and I've realized we are way more resilient as people, as species, that we give ourselves credit in terms of dealing with problems and traumas. But also in my professional life, I have learned to listen more. I have learned to be more empathetic. I've learned to care more about the users. Before, I was a good designer. I was winning lots of awards and stuff, but it was mainly for creative art direction, being different, doing things differently, just because of I wanted to be different. I wanted to design differently. But now I don't do that anymore. I'm more involved with the user. I'm more involved with the research side of things, understanding people's needs and understanding people's requirements. We talk about accessibility here, but accessibility and disabilities come in many shapes, colors, and sizes. It's different for everybody. It's just being able to care and being able to listen to those voices and making sure that we design products that works for as many people as possible. I've also learned, unfortunately, at work, it's still a stigma around it. It's a bit of an ick when you say I'm disabled. I have started on my job applications, for example, I've started saying it. I mean, if a company is that narrow-minded, they can go and find somebody else, because I lived with kind of hiding it for a long time. I mean, even now I spend years at an agency, but I still didn't feel comfortable to tell them how bad it was. They knew something had happened to my vision. They knew there was something wrong. All I said I want some natural light and I'll be fine. Because I wasn't confident enough to say that I am disabled or I can't see. Is that bad in terms of what I just showed you, in terms of 50% field of vision? I mean, how can you be a designer and have 50% field of vision? But actually, I was a senior designer when that happened, and the last full-time job I had, I was head of product and experience design. And I ended up working with all these lovely people and more. And I did much better work. I did much more impactful work. And the awards that were coming afterwards were more rewarding, more impactful, more satisfying for me as a person and as a designer. And they were coming in terms of UX UK awards, in terms of impact awards, in terms of communication, in terms of, but all these, they were all based on impact and the results of paying attention to the user, in terms of creating better experiences, in terms of basically reducing time or increasing legibility, improving navigation, whatever it might be, syntax and semantics or whatever. But I was doing a lot of good work in terms of massive bank transformation, big digital projects. And the only project that I feel very, very proud of is a piece of work, is the simplest piece of work that I have done in my entire career. And that was a health software. And statistics shows, and we did some research, but there are also organizations like World Health Organization. The statistics shows that 95% of people, when they visit a doctor, they forget about 80% of the information they are given by the time they leave the surgery. And me included. I always take my partner with me to take notes or whatever. And it's because of a few things. It's because of education, because of language barriers, because of complex medical terminologies that doctors think everybody needs to understand, but obviously that's not the case. But most importantly, is because of anxiety and stress. Because when you are in that situation and you are listening to a doctor banging on about all these symptoms and words and medical terminologies, you basically get confused. So a friend of mine who's a doctor said, we are facing this problem with our patients. And I said, I'm your best person to design this for you, because let's do some more research, but let's simplify this thing. So what we did is basically just a simple software where the doctor, during the consultation, sits with the patient, loads up an image of that body part where they want to discuss, and all they do is basically like FigJam. They can draw lines and have some tools in terms of shapes and text and colors. They can annotate the issues, the areas, highlight the areas, annotate the treatment plans, etc. And this can be packaged up and sent via email to the patient or added to their health records. And this is just the MVP we launched. And so far, we've had some great results in terms of 83%, for example, of specialists reporting explaining complex medical terms was made easier. Patients were more engaged by 81%. The tool helps patients with breaking language barriers, 66. Anyway, with these results kept coming. And this is so satisfying because I know the issue firsthand. I experienced the issue firsthand. And basically, I almost solved a problem for myself as a designer, as a disabled designer. So I really enjoyed that. Even though it's the smallest piece of work that I've ever done, I'm the most proud of it because I could see the impact coming in. So I would like to close this talk, this session, with some advice. Because like mentioned before, it's still a struggle. People talk about it, but it's still not 100%. It's not even close to that. For example, organizations. I've worked in a lot of brand agencies and design agencies, and we've done a lot of brand guidelines and purpose, vision, mission, all these lovely things people talk about, but they always group disabled people in a persona that is very cliche, and it's basically doesn't tell you anything about anything because it's quite hard to sum up accessibility in a persona. So if you look at a lot of guidelines, you see this is a persona with an image of a lady behind a computer in a wheelchair, which is the biggest cliche that you could come up with. I saw this on a website and I thought, let me see how many people actually use it. So I reverse searched that individual image alone and I got 180 results back. So what that tells me, and I keep reading some of the mission statements and what they say about disability. All of them say the same thing, pretty much. They all say it's like it's been written by ChatGPT or something. It's crazy. So my thing for companies, I'd say, take it seriously and do it properly. It's an ick, it's embarrassing, and people will find out that it's basically just words, empty words. Again, like we said earlier, it's a group effort. It's not one thing. It's not switch the light on or fix something quickly. This is all about optimizing what you have. You don't need to spend millions and millions on reinventing everything that basically you have at the moment. It's just taking small steps to improving stuff like your readability or keyboard control or whatever it might be, all the lovely stuff we were just listening to. So the companies need to pay attention to that. And for designers, I think the key thing about UX and experience or product is to design from a source of truth. If we want to design proper solutions for people with issues, we need to design from a source of truth. And that's why we do research, and that's why we do discovery sessions and all these things. And to get to the truth, the most important thing is to involve the right people. And involving people with disabilities is one of the best things you could do in terms of, because we are the people who are living with it. We are the people who experience the difficulties every day. And my situation, I'm fine. I'm not too bad in terms of I'm used to working, designing. My life is normal apart from not driving. But if you look at other disabilities, it's serious stuff for a lot of people. It's 1.3 billion people around the world who live with some sort of disability, be it sensory, be it motor, or neurological, whatever. And disabled people are your best problem solvers because they know what it is that we are solving. And if you think about design these days, you look at a website, you have 12 columns, everything is in cards, everything looks, it's going towards a standardized solution for everything, which is a shame, really, because that's the easy way. That's the easy way out. And I look at AI coming in, which is great. I use AI every day. It's fine. Sometimes you get a block, and at least it opens up that mind block. But the problem I have with AI is we keep moving towards a standardized web, which is great for sometimes for a consistency of experience. People can basically take knowledge from one website to another. But that standardization is aimed at mainly average people, and there are no average people, and the human condition is not average. It's changing constantly. You don't think you are not disabled today, but by in a few years' time, if we are lucky and we live long enough, we will 100% become disabled. Our motor skills and capabilities will slow down. We will become older. We will become more. Our eyesight will go, and so all these things we need to think about. And I think AI is great, but I think your compassion as a designer and your empathy will never replace your empathy. Prompts will never replace your empathy when it comes to design. So I'd say use it to your advantage, but don't rely on it heavily. And it's the same with UX writing and all these things. You put in crap, you get crap out in terms of AI. So that's the only concern that I have in the future with AI. It's basically just things not being thought of properly by people, by humans who understand other people. And finally, for people living with disability, I would say life gives you a lemon sometimes, and people say make lemonade, but I can tell you for fact that is one of the worst advice you can give to somebody who is living with a disability, because there is only so much lemonade you can make out of a lemon. Well, I would say learn from your difficulties, ask for help, because there is nothing wrong with asking for help, and try and help some other people along your journey. So that is my advice for three main groups that I wanted to talk about in this talk. And just as for the tumor, so about 5 years ago, I finished my radiotherapy. I finished my chemotherapy, and I managed to ring the end of my treatment bell.
As loud as you can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kardo. This is probably the only presentation I've ever seen where the collaborative notes are just empty, and it's not because people aren't engaged, it's because they're so engaged with what you're saying that they're just not even taking notes on it whatsoever. Like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, or people actually no, people are really paying attention and hanging on every word here. And I just want to thank you for sharing your personal experience here, as I'm sure you hear often when you do share the story. That leads me just to ask you, like in general, like it's such a scary thing to share a personal story, especially something that could be so devastating and have such a long journey associated with it. What has inspired you to share your story with other people?
Okay. So I was working at my last contract work, and I was mentioning it to a colleague of mine, and he said, "Oh, you need to talk about this because it's good." So it's good for people to understand it. So I was going to write a blog post about it, and then another friend said to me that could work against you. He said that could be like a career suicide. People read it and think this guy is absolutely useless, which is true, but not because of my eyes. So I decided to do a session at IXDA first, and so just so people could see I'm well. But it's nice, it's liberating to talk about it to people and hopefully give people some perspective into the life of a disabled person. And it's easier for me to talk about it in terms of accessibility and design because I can merge the two together, my skills and my experience.
You know, someone in the comments left a comment that says, in my opinion, the two most important words in this presentation are 1, empathy, and 2, compassion, and both are sorely lacking these days. You know, try to cultivate more of them. What would you like what would you like people to ultimately walk away from this talk at the end of the day? You did leave lots of sound practical advice for 3 different groups of people, but what ultimately would you like us to walk away with?
I would like designers especially to learn to listen more. I would like them to engage the right people when they are designing as much as possible. And unfortunately, a lot of these things are budget dependent, and a lot of kind of companies have red lines like, no, we can't get this, we can't get that. But try and find the right people to speak to. Try and like, for example, I designed an app for property buying and selling. I realized that people were buying properties and selling properties for different reasons, and it was very stressful. Some people were getting married, some people were having children, some people were getting divorced. And luckily, just within our office, we found tons of people who were buying and selling for all these reasons. So we learned a lot just by going around and finding people in our own network. So you don't have to spend thousands and thousands on something. You just need to try and find the right people to speak to.
Thank you. Stephanie actually left a great question in the chat too, and I might even pose it to the panel and at large, but specifically to you, if you feel okay to share, do you use any assistive technologies to help you in your design, but also your daily life?
Initially, when I came out of the operation, or when I was recovering for the first month or so, I was relying a lot on text readers, voice to text, screen readers, I mean. But not anymore, because I've retrained myself and I have basically managed to do away with those things.
That's incredible.
In terms of assistive technology, no, I don't use anything anymore. It's still difficult when I read a lot of text, especially on wide monitors and stuff like that. Again, I was working at a company, and the head of design, I was designing the terms and condition pages, you know, the boring legal stuff.
Sure.
And we had a 12-column grid, and I was designing at 8 columns, so I was leaving 2 on each side. He said to me, no, go full width. And I said, why? He said, well, you don't need recall on these text pages. It's just text. It doesn't matter. Go full width so the page doesn't look that long. Anyway, I started arguing with him. I didn't say anything until I did what he asked me for. But then I presented this at the company, and he joined, and I showed that slide, and you should have just seen his face. His face just went like complete. It's basically, internally, you need to constantly educate people that why is something accessible and why is it something not accessible.
Yes.
So.
Well, I've got other questions, but I know that we also have, questions for the panel, as a whole. So I want to go ahead and welcome back up the other speakers here.
Thank you all for your time. Thank you.
My gosh.